All right. Good morning, kids. How's everybody doing? Welcome to another episode of The Abyss AM with your host, The Eternal Abyss. That's me. I have coffee. I hope you do too. Gonna take a sip right now. Coffee. All right. So, I hope everyone had a good day yesterday. Today is Thursday, the 25th, so I have to mention this off the bat. This evening is one of the weekly episodes of The Abyss, evening streams, where we're just going to make it a bit more interactive than usual, you know. I have a description, I have a Discord link in my description where people can mark that down, click on it. I won't be taking any calls or call ins or anything like that now, but in the evening, for the regular episode, I definitely will, and if anyone's interested in talking, and we're just gonna have some fun and see what happens with the news of the day and make it all work as much as we can. Morning, Gunter Penguin from Bitwave, and I want to say hello to everybody on Bitwave, and I want to say hello to everybody on all the other platforms that you happen to be listening on. I want to say hello to everybody on Periscope, YouTube, and DLive. So, admittedly, the news cycle has been a slightly sparse in terms of anything particularly new that I wanted to address. There's a couple things that I've seen where it would be good to to see if I can kind of make some updates or some commentary on a couple things. So I'm more than happy to do that. One thing that I'm seeing here in the trends, for example, is David Lee Roth. So there's this article that came out from the Huffington Post, which anything that comes out of the Huffington Post or BuzzFeed, you always have to go, well, let's see what this is all about, because you know these Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, and Mother Jones. These are some publications for those that may or may not be aware. Might as well just say it because I just want to try and include everybody in my audience, regardless of how like focused or politically invested you are in the current news trends and biases and things of that nature. So I might as well just pretend that my audience isn't fully engaged in all that, which there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, not everybody is constantly monitoring the news. Not everybody is um really focused on whether the media is biased, like how biased the media really is. Because media is always going to have its bias. There's nothing really unusual about that, but it's just that hmm, coffee. It's just that some outlets are just unabashed about how biased they are, and they'll just straight out lie, just straight out twist things, manipulate information, and straight out just make stuff up. I mean, you've had CNN, MSNBC, ABC, BuzzFeed especially. Um, has been particularly bad. So, but this article from the Huffington Post, you know, there's Sammy Hagar, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm terrible with names, by the way. I want to make this clear. I am not shy about saying my pronunciation of names is I have a long track record of being just terrible at that. So, um, I'm not gonna lie. I always have problems with pronouncing names. But Sammy Hagar, assuming that's how you pronounce his name, the frontman for Van Halen, after David Lee Roth. If I remember how the timeline worked, that Sammy Hagar replaced Van Halen. Replaced David Lee Roth, I mean, in Van Halen. Another thing I'm terrible about, I'm not really big on remembering names of bands. Like the people that make up the band. I remember the name of the band. Like I know Van Halen. I know AC/DC. You ask me, well, who's the guitarist in the AC/DC or who's the main singer in Van Halen? Van Halen is a slight exception. I kind of know them. But for the most part, I'm going to be like, I don't know. As long as they're part of the band, that's pretty much all I care about. If they're not, I don't really, I don't memorize the drummer, the bassist, the guitarist, the keyboardist, all that. I just don't. It's never been. I've never had an interest in learning every single name of every single band member of every single band. So there's that. But Sammy Hagar puts out this thing talking about the dilemma, actually, and it is a interesting dilemma that we face as a nation and in the world, really. The question is, what is going to do more harm, really? Is it going to be reopening and having more COVID cases, or is it just COVID itself? Or is the economy, the fact that we stay closed? Because this is the question right now that a lot of people are debating. Should we extend lockdown? Should we stay closed? Should we keep everything under lockdown, which means more people on unemployment, which is another thing that's trending today. You had 1.5 million new people signing up for benefits, unemployment benefits. However, context is required for that, because if you just look at the number, that may sound pretty bad, and it kind of is. But at the same time, it's like, well, there's 20,000 less than last month. So actually, that means there is a slight improvement. We have another stimulus coming down the way, so that may actually help. Places are opening. And regardless of the spike, and this is where the question comes in, because you are looking at an increase in number of COVID cases. However, the death rate is still going down. That's the fascinating thing about this. So it means that even though we're seeing more cases, for whatever reason it may be, BuzzFeed, for example, claims that cities where the protests happen have not seen COVID spikes, which is a verifiable lie, actually, because I believe Houston was one where they had a big thing, and in New York is still like the number one city. And they still seeing they still have big numbers. There's not really necessarily a big decline in New York or anything like that. So, pardon me. Speaking of COVID, I'm coughing here. I'm fine. I just needed to wet my whistle here with some more coffee. Excuse me. Okay. So this is the thing, is you're gonna have media that's gonna be portraying this. Of course, BuzzFeed, they don't have an interest in being honest in their portrayal of information. Neither does Huffington Post. But David Lee Roth comes into all this because, as I mentioned, Sammy Hagar was talking about this. They interviewed him for some reason. I don't know why. And he said that the economy not opening is going to cause more harm longer term if we don't start reopening. And he said that his choice for himself would be, he is more than happy if it's safe to perform have his crowds perform, and he's willing to even sacrifice himself. He said he's willing to die for to make it so less people suffer long term. Which, on one side, you could say, well, that's kind of a noble thing in a way, because he's like, well, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for my kids, my family, for other people. If that means the economy reopening and everything taking its course, and we just go back to a level of normalcy in our world, which we so desperately require. On the other side, I actually do understand the other side of the argument on this one. They're like, well, if you're just going to get crowds, you're going to get more people sick, there's a higher chance people will die. Okay. I get both sides of the argument. But again, if we look at the numbers, and I think if I still have, I don't know if I still have that. I have brought up a page here. I think I had an issue with my laptop yesterday. I had a couple pages up that show graphs. I was going to show that. Seems like it's gone. So I'm not going to waste my time on stream here trying to bring up everything to show. I can try and get that ready for this evening just to kind of reiterate that, because I'm just, you're just gonna hear me tapping on my keyboard, and that's pointless. So I'm not gonna do that right now. I'll just reiterate what I was talking about. You've seen the number increase in cases. Yes, that's absolutely accurate. I'm not denying the numbers. And as I'm not denying the numbers, you have to also look at the death rate. That has not increased. In fact, if you look at, there's this graph, and I will bring, you know what? I think I will bring it up anyways. Let's see if I can do that real quick here, because actually it is very fascinating to look at. And I don't want people to just say, oh, you're just claiming stuff without showing anything, because that's what let's see here. That's what some people do online. You know, they just make claims, and I get it. You know, I don't want to be accused of just spinning stories here. So here we go. Now, and I even take these numbers with a grain of salt, because it's Microsoft. I'm using the Bing. I know, COVID-19 tracker. But let's look at. Let me expand this here. Okay. Let's see if I can actually show the proper graph. This is the one that I want to show here. Nope, that's not the one I want to show. This is the one I want to show. Okay. So let me go into my little streaming thingamabob here. Stand by. I should have some like elevator music for when I'm getting stuff together here. Oh, no, I don't want that. I want the window capture. There we go. And I think I have this cropped, so let me just adjust that very quickly. So just take a moment here. But like I said, I need some elevator music for when I'm doing this stuff. You know? I think we're good here. Let me just make sure. There we go. Okay, perfect. Now I can display that for everyone to see. I'm gonna actually superimpose this over everything, because the page is kind of big on the screen here, so stand by here. So all right, this is the curve, as you can see, when it comes to new cases that are fatal cases, which means these people died of COVID. So there's two things to keep in mind here. As you can see, it's pretty obvious what's happening here. You have a good downward trend that's happening, which is a positive thing. Overall, the trend is downward. The actual mortality rate, if you calculate the numbers, is still hovering around a 0.04 to 0.05 mortality rate. The ages of those that are affected are still, if you're like 64 or 60 or above or something like that, there's that a much higher percentile that you will get a fatal case of COVID. But if you're younger, there's a good chance it's just going to be either mild or even if severe. Usually people with COVID between younger ages, like in your average age range, which is the vast majority, it's actually the fatality rate is very small for that. The percentage of those, like that percentile, they won't die from it. So is it a nasty flu? Sure. And I'm not saying this to say that there's no risks involved in reopening and there's no risks to people. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that you have to look at the numbers and the trends here. And even though the testing numbers, like the people who contracted it, has increased, which is also a thing you have to look at the numbers for that too, because there's been far more testing happening now than there was before. And you have all these protests that happen in all these cities. You have you have states that are opening little by little. You're going to see spikes. You're going to see bumps in those numbers. But the key factor is this. The key factor is hospitals are not overwhelmed by all these cases, for example. I haven't seen reports of hospitals. In fact, hospitals have closed down because they had dedicated them solely to COVID to take this major influx that they were predicting, which Fauci botched that prediction up, as just another one of his predictions that he goofed. And there's been hospitals that have been shut down, people in the medical community and medical field that have lost their jobs because of botched predictions. And then on top of that, the numbers have never been that accurate to begin with because as Steven Crowder did a great bit on this. I'm not going to reiterate what he said, but essentially it boils down to someone goes to the hospital for a heart attack, or someone goes to the hospital because they tried to commit suicide or shoot themselves or something like that. They end up dying of whatever that cause was, or they had an underlying condition, like they said they had diabetes, or they had a severe heart condition. They contracted COVID, but it wasn't really COVID that killed them. More accurately, it was what their condition was, or if they harmed themselves, or whatever the cause actually was. And Colorado adjusted their numbers for that, and they saw that there was a drop in the number of deaths by about 25%. Now that's kind of significant, because if you want to be accurate about how deadly, for example, this virus really is, it makes sense to be accurate about that. And again, that doesn't mean that you just say, well, I'm going to discount this. I'm not going to, all the consequences be damned. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying people need to keep things in context. And there's a political aspect to this, unfortunately. Everything is turned political, which is a problem. And even if there are like some numbers that have gone down, and that's the thing too. There are states, overall, all states are doing relatively well. You see some, like I know Texas has seen some spikes. I know that some states have seen some spikes, but overall, if you look at the overall number and the overall trends, really, again, that death rate is what's really important, I find, because you don't see an enormous spike in the death rate, and I think that's really key. I think that is really key here. Because if you, like I said, if you number crunch, you'll see that the death rate is still about 0.05%, which overall, like in terms of pandemics, in terms of deadly viruses and epidemics and plagues and things like that, really that's not a big death rate. That's not a really large mortality rate. Now, people that have lost loved ones because of COVID, I mean, I'm not saying that just because the percentile of mortality of the virus is small that those deaths are insignificant. Absolutely not. I feel terrible for people that have lost loved ones during this time. I feel terrible for the people that have lost their livelihoods and their businesses and they need to rebuild. These are trying times. No doubt about that. But we have to keep things in context. And I think that even if with increased testing, and at one point, some predictions that were made by Fauci and other people were saying that, just about everybody's going to catch it at one point or another, which very well may be true. And if that's the case, you know what? Guess what? You're going to have very large numbers of people with COVID. But again, going back to the mortality rate, if the mortality rate still is just as it is now, which that seems to be the trend. I mean, if you look globally at the global numbers around the world, which is the fascinating thing. Globally around the world, you have under 10 million, and then you have, I think about under 500,000 people dead. That's around 0.05. Then you have just in the U.S., the number that you have in the U.S. and the number of deaths in the U.S. Again, if you punch out the numbers and number crunch, it's about 0.05. So it seems like it's somewhat indiscriminate no matter where someone gets this thing. It appears that that's essentially what the mortality rate's going to be. It's been holding for forever since this whole thing started. So BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post can try and politicize this as much as they want. David Lee Roth can say, you can die first, I'm going to stay locked down. Well, yeah, you know what? It's very fortunate and lucky for you, David Lee Roth, who has a lot of money, more so than your average schmo. Where your celebrity status and living in a giant mansion or whatever, you have the luxury of saying stuff like that. People are suffering out there. And they're not necessarily suffering because of COVID, of the virus itself. They're suffering because their livelihood's gone. They don't have an income. They have a family to feed. They have bills to pay. And I know that it sounds a little petty to say it's more important to go out and earn a living and rather than, risk the risk of infection. But at the end of the day, most people make that decision. They have to make that decision on their own. And it's not fair to vilify people, in my view. If they need to get back to work to feed themselves, feed their family, pay their bills, I don't see that as evil. I don't see that as something to vilify people over. I don't think it's wise to keep depending on the government to try and help you. Now, does that mean just go back to the way it was without any sort of precautions? No. Take all the precautions you want. You want to wear a mask? Wear masks. You want to wear gloves? Wear gloves. You want to have a different cleaning method of your offices, for example, or restaurants, or you want a social distance. If you want to take any and all precautions, by all means, do so. I have no problems with that. Whatever makes you feel good, and whatever makes the businesses feel good about reopening. If they want to even provide face masks and gloves for people as they walk into their store, restaurant, place of business, whatever. I don't have an issue with businesses doing what they feel they need to do to make sure that people can get back to work. Unfortunately, a lot of work cannot be done remotely. That's the biggest problem. There's certain jobs that you're going to have to do in person. More coffee. I mean, again, like I said, these are trying times we live in. And people have to make that choice. And these governors like in New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, California, Washington, or mayors of Washington, for example. I'm not too sure about the governor. I haven't heard too much whether the governor of Washington is just as derpy as those in Michigan, for example. They want to keep the country locked down indefinitely. And it's unfortunate that it's not because of the health reasons. They'll claim it's that. But it's really not. Because they've made it very clear, and there's even people that have said this, like Bill Maher on his show. He's said that the best thing for Democrats, for them to win the election, is to have the economy like go into another recession or depression. Because the economy was one of the strongest things that Trump could tout in his campaigning. And the irony of that is that even though things are how they are now, oddly enough, Trump could still claim a good economy. And here's why. Follow me on this logic. And I've mentioned this in other streams before. He built a strong economy before COVID. COVID wasn't intentional. It's not like the economy went into a recession naturally. There wasn't bubbles that burst or economic downfalls of investments or whatever. There wasn't an economic reason why our economy and our markets had a big well, let's not even call it a slowdown, because it wasn't really a slowdown. You still have days. The markets are a little volatile right now, as I mentioned in other streams. It goes up and down, but whenever it loses, it goes back up really strongly. So there's a strong economy waiting to come back, and that's what I'm getting at. The markets aren't dead. The markets are pretty responsive still, and it's still at a good, like I said, the Dow is at 25,000. I mean, that's not a bad number. So, if anyone's paying attention to the markets and the financial world, I'm no expert. I don't claim to be an expert in the markets and stocks and anything like that. But just someone like myself, who's a layperson looking at this from the outside in, can see that you have record numbers still. You have strong gains. You have you have losses too. Don't get me wrong. But overall, you have a pretty strong economy underneath that's waiting to come back. And as soon as things come back, that economy is going to come back. I'm almost willing to bet money on it, which is what the whole stock market is about, really. Now is a good time to invest if you really want to invest in certain things that will be coming back later on. Like airline companies, those will probably come back I don't know how soon. I'm not gonna make any sort of predictions on that. Like I said, this isn't a financial advice show. I'm not gonna tell people what to invest in or what not to invest in. But I'm saying just generally, from my perspective is, and I've heard many people talk about this too. Just face to face, if I'm talking to people that I know and et cetera, they're like, "Oh yeah, I bought this stock now, and because it really dropped, now it's accessible." Like before, I couldn't buy these stocks, but now that it's down, I'm able to make a couple of investments in my portfolio, for example. Is that for everybody? I don't know. You have to make your own decision when it comes to that. So moving on though, you have, along with this whole thing, there's been this trend all kind of, I don't know, all day yesterday, but for a good portion of the day, and it's still trending. Can we call Trump a killer president, blah blah blah. That, again, see, that's the problem with places like Twitter. They become echo chambers for ridiculous trends like this, and Twitter will allow this trend to happen. That's the thing. Because of how they manipulate their algorithms. Now, I'm not saying that Twitter should kill any trend. Actually, quite the opposite. I'm saying that Twitter should just not manipulate trends. Leave the crap alone. If something is trending, let it trend. If it doesn't trend, let it die. Don't artificially boost things because it's politically expedient for you. All right. So you have these things people have been, and this is something I've seen online a lot. People have been saying that Trump is directly responsible for the COVID deaths. Now again, I was about to say I see the argument that they make, but honestly, no, I don't. It's a dumb argument because if you look at the numbers, the death rate again for the entire world has been the same. 0.05. So if the death rate is the same for any country, on average, I'm speaking here. Of course, there are some states and some countries where that death rate was much higher. For example, Italy. Mostly because Italy made some very, very poor decisions, and like some states made some very, very poor decisions. Case in point, New York. Case in point, Michigan. Case in point, Seattle, like Washington, where they had that entire senior home got wiped out because I don't know what the hell they were doing. But New York specifically, Cuomo is directly responsible for it because it was their policy. It was New York policy to do this. Excuse me. So if the state has a policy where someone infected with COVID is put into a senior home, along with body bags, mind you, there were reports that they were sending people into senior homes with body bags. That's a state thing. That falls directly on the lap of Cuomo. Whitmer, half-wit Whitmer here, that people have have been calling her. She's the governor of Michigan. That genius right there was doing the same thing. He's been accused of doing the same thing. And it's not just an accusation. I've seen reports that it's true. Morning, hetero alpha god. Thank you for joining in on the stream. And speaking of, let's take a quick pause to kind of promote myself a little bit. Follow me on the Wave, D-Live, Periscope, and YouTube. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell because if you don't, you won't know when I go live. But follow me also on Twitter and on Parler, on Gab, and on Minds. So you get all the fun tweets of me ranting and raving online. Which I'm sure are entertaining to some folks. Why not? So do that. And if you care to even support the show financially, if you can during these times, obviously you got to make that decision. What's more important for you? Take care of yourself first. But if you can spare a little pocket change. Streamlabs.com/theeternalabyss. Any level of generosity is greatly appreciated. So moving on. I don't think it's fair. Alright, thank you, sir. Following and getting coffee too. That's my man. Oh yeah, speaking of, I'm gonna take a sip of mine. So, I don't think it's fair to, and I would have said this even under Obama. If a state had a policy which directly led to the death of people because of how stupid this policy was, as much as I would not have liked Obama, for example, and I didn't, I wouldn't say that he's the one responsible, because the governors made the decision. It's like what happened in Flint, the Flint water issue in Michigan, which became a nationwide scandal. You had a Republican governor at the time, and everybody was blaming him for it. Now, there were missteps taken where things would the buck stops at him when it comes to the state that he runs. But at the same time, it's like, well, wait a minute. You also have to consider what happened with the city itself, because from what was happening there, and I'm not going to get into this whole story with the Flint thing, but I'm just getting into it just to kind of give context to what I'm talking about. Is that the city of Flint decided they didn't want their water coming from Detroit anymore, which they had been getting this water from Detroit for who knows how long. They decided they wanted to use their own water supply. There were some very poor choices made in the water processing. The infrastructure was not good for that. The city made poor decisions as well. The county made poor decisions. There was a lot of issues around that. It wasn't solely on the governor, but of course it was politically expedient to just blame the Republican governor, because it's a very blue area of Michigan, for example. So, it's unfortunate that kind of thing has to turn political. It was a bad situation that happened, and we as Americans looking at this story, people in Michigan looking at this story, they should look at all the data and place blame where it is to be placed. Same thing with this COVID thing, which is why it's unfortunate that it's purely political. It's very unfortunate that it's purely political. The problem with this whole situation is the politicians, governors are using it for political campaigning, posturing. They're using it because they want to run on this to defeat Donald Trump. That's really what it is. Instead of actually addressing the problems that came with this, the problems with the WHO, the problems with all the wrong predictions of Fauci and the other doctor, which her name escapes me at the moment. It starts with the letter B, as in boy. But point being, it's a highly politicized thing now. So you have also Trump. This is a news item that I saw here that was trending, that Trump is ending federal funding for 13 COVID-19 testing sites, which, it kind of falls on the states anyways to test this kind of stuff. So if the federal government has provided the support that the states need for the states to do what they need to do, I don't really think that this is that big a deal. But this is from the New York Post. And he also is supporting more coronavirus stimulus spending. So there's gonna be another round of the stimulus spending to give the economy a boost. And You know, it's hilarious. He's getting pushback for everything. He's getting pushback on wanting to stimulate the economy. This is the problem with politics in a Trump era. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It's like it almost doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter what you do anymore. So, moving on, I've kind of made my point on that. I don't feel I need to dwell on that indefinitely. Another thing that's come up is Carly Fiorina. She's back in the news. She's back in the news because she's saying she's going to vote for Joe Biden. Can anybody say they're surprised at this? Can anybody really say they're surprised at this? First of all, Carly Fiorina, she was the head of HP, ran as a Republican in the Republican primary when Trump was running, got decimated basically because her policies were just horrible. She was basically another Clinton in terms of how she portrayed herself, how she talked, how her policies weren't that good. And now she says she's voting for Joe Biden. Why is it? I'm not surprised at this. Because she didn't seem like a real conservative to me. She didn't seem like a real Republican to me. She seemed like a rhino. And this pretty much proves exactly why she lost. Carly Fiorina is another person like Hillary Clinton, who's bitter because she lost, and she's never going to be president, and she's just she's just petty, and she's not really a Republican. She's not really a conservative, because if someone is really a conservative and really a Republican, by policy alone, I'm not talking about Trump as a person. I'm talking about policies. The grand majority of his policies have actually been in line with Republican policies. The vast majority has been in line with conservatism. There have been some of Trump's policies that have not necessarily been Republican or conservative. I'm more than happy and willing to admit that, because it's the truth. The guy has some more moderate and left-leaning views for certain things. And honestly, for those things that he champions, he doesn't even, certain things he hasn't even tried to address, because to him they're settled things. He doesn't care about them. Which I'm at a point where I'm more concerned about other more pressing matters anyways. I don't need him to address certain things that I feel maybe should be addressed. Because they're not on the grand scheme of things super duper important. Electoral fraud, for example, to me is way more important. Voter ID or some sort of way of verifying citizenship during elections, and the integrity of elections, to me is far more important than like certain other issues that, like one thing that was really touted in the last administration was like the diet for schools, for example. I mean, I get it. A lot of poor kids depend on the food from schools. You want them to be healthy. I perfectly understand that. I get it. But to put that on the same, as being on par with electoral fraud that we do face on a regular basis, in all levels of government and elections, it's not the same thing. They're not. It's not an apples to apples comparison, is what I'm saying. So I say that, let's focus on the things that are important, and when it comes to the important things, yeah, he does have more conservative policies. Absolutely, and there's no denying that. So Carly Fiorina can vote for whoever she wants. It won't make a difference. And you have these rhinos that have been saying that these never Trumpers. That's fine. Do what you gotta do. You're a very tiny number, never Trumpers. Very small. So you can go ahead and do that. Be my guest. It doesn't make a lick of difference to me. The other thing that I saw that I wanted to talk about, if this, let's see. Yes, this was something that I saw in the news that came up, which I thought was rather fascinating. And Parler is trending again in Twitter. That's been trending for like 2 days now. I'm actually shocked. I'm shocked that Twitter has not cratered that trend. They generally don't like trends, and then the media has started to trash Parler, by the way, which I am on at the Eternal Abyss with 2 S's at the end, the way it should be spelled, on Parler. So get on there, follow me on there, and on my other Twitter account and on my other social media accounts. I mean, but yeah, I'm shocked that that's still trending, honestly. But the news items that I wanted to talk about was the Capitol Hill residents and businesses are suing the city of Seattle for failing to disband CHOP. So let me just read a little bit of this. This is from the Seattle Times, mind you, not a. I don't think it's a conservative publication. Ooh, pardon me. Goodness, my coffee is coming back to bite me. At all here. So let's see. So a group of Capitol Hill residents and businesses have filed a class action lawsuit Wednesday against the city of Seattle for the extensive harm they faced as a result of CHOP, the Capitol Hill organized protest. I like how they tried to change the nomenclature of that, because Chaz, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, I guess really didn't jive with the public. So they had to change it to organized protest. I just find that funny. Anyways, demonstrators have occupied several blocks around the Seattle police, which is being disbanded now, actually. I think it has been disbanded at this point. By the Summer of Love, a Black Party environment mayor, Jenny Durkin, who I still cannot believe that stupidity to say something like that after there were 2 shooting incidents. One ended in a fatality, the other like 2 people were critically injured for a while. I think only 1 death resulted of all the shootings that happened at the Chaz. But moving on here, so demonstrators have occupied several blocks around the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct and Cal Anderson Park for about 2 weeks, since the police left the precinct following standoffs and clashes with protesters calling for racial justice and an end to police brutality. Calfo Eeks LLP, the law firm representing the group, said in a statement the lawsuit is, quote, not a step their clients have taken lightly, end quote, adding that they stand with the Black Lives Matter movement and support demonstrators' right to free speech and assembly. The plaintiffs include owners of apartment buildings in the area and local businesses such as Car Tender, Northwest Liquor and Wine, Sage Physical Therapy, and Tattoos and Fortune. That's quite the combo. The lawsuit seeks unspecified damages. The lawsuit does not seek to undermine CHOP participants' message or present a counter message, the lawsuit says. Rather, this lawsuit is about the constitutional and other legal rights of plaintiffs, which have been overrun by the city of Seattle's unprecedented decision to abandon and close off the entire city neighborhood, leaving it unchecked by the police, unserved by fire and emergency health services, and inaccessible to the public at large. In a statement to the Seattle Times, a spokesperson for the city's attorney's office said they haven't received the lawsuit yet, but when they do, they will review it and respond accordingly. So the lawsuit also, let's just wrap it up. There's one final paragraph. The lawsuit blames the city for aiding CHOP occupants by providing them with stronger barriers, public restroom facilities, and medical supplies. It also mentions that residents and business owners now have difficulty accessing their buildings, receiving deliveries, and providing services to customers, with elderly and disabled community members facing magnified obstacles. Now, one thing I do want to address about all this, first of all, Uh, I don't think there's any sort of discussion here about constitutionality of protests. So I know that the lawyer is trying to be PC here and not piss off the BLM crowd by saying what he's saying, that this isn't a criticism, we agree with them, blah 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 blah. I get that. However, occupation does not fall under peaceful protest. When you're torching police buildings, like in Minneapolis, when you are guarding a area and you're claiming it as an autonomous zone, a different country from the country you live in, and you're guarding it with guns, that's not a peaceful protest anymore. That's an occupation. That's terrorist acts when you're attacking people. And there's shootings and arguments and fights that happen there. Hey Duncan, Idaho. You ask, I wonder what the legal distinction is was Occupy Wall Street a legal protest? Occupy Wall Street. See, if you have just a peaceful occupation, if you just do a sit-in, because that is part of peaceful protest. You just do a peaceful sit-in. You're not harming people. You're not harming the community around you. It's just it's a demonstration. You go in, you sit in for a period of time, you leave. That falls under peaceful protest. But when you actually prevent police from doing their job, you're putting people in harm's way. When you won't let ambulances go and get people that are sick, when you won't let fire trucks go through, when you won't let people get their food delivered, when you're disrupting services. And the biggest problem is that the city encouraged this, as the article says. They provided porta potties, they provided strong barriers. And as a result, people have died. One person died, other people have been shot and injured. That's a direct result of the city's irresponsible actions in encouraging this garbage. So I think legally, a case like this will make that line clear about that legal distinction, and I think it needs to be made. Because I don't think that what happened at Chaz qualifies as peaceful protest. I don't think that is a peaceful assembly. Okay? I don't think that's the case. So I welcome a lawsuit of that kind, and I think that this issue needs to be examined, because especially if the groups that were involved were also Antifa, which are domestic terrorists, that also plays into the distinction whether something is legal or not. If you're going with guns and you're threatening people, and they were stealing money from white people, extorting money, essentially, they were shaking people down. Hey Chillwave, how you doing? Hi Runer, by the way. Runer says, do you know what this reminds me of? In London, or I should say more properly in England, selections, they have those strange party candidates that run against the other is for prime minister. Is that referring to Carly Fiorina when I was talking about Carly Fiorina? Yeah, possibly. That wouldn't surprise me, that sort of comparison, honestly, because you have, just look at Mitt Romney, for example. This guy has said he's Republican. He's never acted as such. You have that that other lady who every once in a while actually acts like a Republican, but for the most part she always goes against Republican interests. McCain, he was a rhino to the nth degree. The guy never really he always portrayed himself as a centrist, but honestly, he did a lot of. I feel that McCain did a lot more harm than good as a senator. I'm gonna drink some more of my coffee. One moment. So it wouldn't surprise me that people run on these political platforms. And heck, I know this is conspiratorial, and I admit that it's conspiratorial, but it wouldn't even surprise me if political oppositions put plants in each other's primaries to try and screw up other people's elections, because there's nothing that really regulates that. There's nothing that shows, as long as you register as a Republican or something like that, you can run as a Republican. Does that mean you are a Republican? No. You could be like a socialist Democrat and say, I'm a Republican, and try and screw up and try and screw up the other people's primaries. It's perfectly doable. I don't have any I'm not claiming that has happened. I'm just saying politics is dirty. That is what I am saying, though. Politics is a very dirty game. And to be part of that game, you have to really go with the punches on that one. And only I feel that takes a certain class of people to want to go into that world, for better or for worse. So I personally would rather be an outsider commenting on all this. Just be on the side of the ring and watch the boxing match, so to speak. That's my opinion on it. So, but going back to this lawsuit, I think that it's a good thing that this lawsuit is happening. I do think that these lines of distinction need to be made. I think it makes sense to to be distinct about this, because I don't want to impede people's rights to protest. But a right to protest does not mean a right to threaten people, to attack people, to torch people's businesses, rioting, looting, vandalism, tearing down statues. That's not peaceful protest anymore. Absolutely not. Especially if you're tearing down statues and doing all sorts of stuff on federal territory or state territory, government territory. That's domestic terrorism. Runer's saying, well, that also leads into, if I'm not misunderstanding, the fact that dozens, thousands of people registered to participate in the recent Trump campaign and did not go. They stay registered to essentially take up the registration seat, but not attend. Absolutely, Runer. Yeah. And AOC admitted to this, and that's in a way that's election fraud. That's election interference, where all these people on TikTok registered because the Trump administration went on TikTok to say, hey, you can register and make a request for a ticket, which they got like 1 million people. I think there was a good number. It wasn't that huge a number, but it was a pretty large number that requested tickets and were no shows because they wanted to show empty seats. So I think moving forward, it would behoove the Trump campaign to be more, there should be a greater verification system on that. There should be a way that if people register, you got to verify that they will actually go, to make it so people can't play this dumb game, because Democrats have been doing that for a long time. They've been trying to do that for a long time, ever since the previous election. Which I find ironic that they have all the time in the world to do that, but they can't even muster enough people to go to a Biden rally. Or like they just cannot get the numbers that Trump gets. Even by doing that, they still can't get that. So it's underhanded. It's dishonest, in my view. I think it's petty. It's childish. It's very immature. How about you try and run on the merit of your policies? How about you try and run and convince people, hey, actually my ideas are good. I mean, I know they can't do that because their ideas are not good. That's why they have to resort to this trickery. They have to resort to being underhanded, and they have to resort to being dishonest. That's really what it boils down to. Because if you can stand on the merit of your own ideas, you don't have to resort to that stuff. I challenge anyone on the left to say that it's perfectly legitimate to do that kind of stuff, because I promise you, if conservatives did that, they registered a bunch of seats and then did no-shows at a Biden rally or Bernie rally or something like that, I will guarantee you two things. One, that they would say, oh, this is paid by the Russians. That's the first thing I guarantee you. Secondly, I will guarantee you that they will call on Trump as being fascist, a dictator. He's trying to destroy democracy, as they've been claiming. Like Hillary Clinton saying, "Oh, he's not gonna accept the results." Oh yeah, the media would have a field day, hetero alpha god. Absolutely right. But like Hillary Clinton, but when the election day was coming up, and she was like, "Oh, he's not gonna accept the results," or he's gonna dispute it. He's gonna do all this, and guess what? They've been disputing the results for 3 years now, almost 4. They're still disputing it. It's very often that the left accuses the right of what they themselves are guilty of. So it's if it wasn't so sad, I mean, it's funny, but at the same time it's so sad. Because all it takes is a little self-awareness to realize what you're doing. But you just either they're just ignoring the self-awareness, like intentionally, or they're really that out of touch with themselves and others. I can't believe that they would be that way. It has to be intentional. I just don't believe that people aren't that self-aware. It just makes no sense to me. One thing that I want to also, speaking of statues being pulled down in protest, Mitch McConnell was talking about in Seattle. Do you know that in Seattle there's a statue of Vladimir Lenin? Yes, there's a statue of Lenin in Seattle, and wouldn't you know it? Nobody vandalized that statue. Nobody tore that statue down. Last I checked, Lenin was not a nice guy. Yet somehow his statue was spared. So, lastly, I just find this ridiculous. Honestly, the whole statue argument, especially when you see things like this where they have statues of Vladimir Lenin that they won't even touch, but they want to take down statues of like Washington and Jefferson and our founding fathers and all this kind of stuff. I find it mind-boggling, to say the least. Because I could bring up some data on Lenin to show, just what a wonderful person that guy was, Mm. And this just that just shows you exactly what this is all about. It's just politics. It's just politics. There really is. This isn't really, at the end of the day, in my opinion, an issue of injustices or what these statues quote unquote represent. Because if it was really about what these statues represented, you would not have a statue of Lenin up and standing in the United States. First of all, that's the first thing. You would not have that statue. Secondly, it would not be standing if it was really a matter of principle. Okay, so that's where I have a problem with people wanting to topple statues or rename buildings. And Rhode Island wants to change the name of their state, and Which again, I even understand it. I understand like what that concern would be if plantation is in the official name of your state. I get that. It's not. It does have a unpleasant connotation, somewhat. But at the same time, you're also in 2020. That connotation of plantation no longer really exists because you still have plantations today which do not have slaves, do not have slave owners. So I think that being so stuck on semantics and so stuck on um, certain aspects of a historical figure, and I talked about this in my last stream yesterday, where it's a logical fallacy at the end of the day. That's what it really boils down to, and I think people need to evolve. I think people need to mature and evolve beyond this pettiness. Regardless of if Jefferson had slaves or not, he was instrumental in the building of this country. It was not good that he had slaves, but he also built this country which enabled the freedom of said slaves and the emancipation of said slaves. He built that foundation and structure in order for that to happen. The country was built on that on a premise that allowed for that to happen. It could have easily put in the Constitution, for example, and all the founding documents. It could have been easily put in there that this was something that could never be removed, never be modified, unless you had to tear down the Constitution and rebuild it from scratch. They could have easily done that, but they didn't. So that just goes to show you that they were very forward thinking in what they were trying to accomplish when they put up when they built the foundation of the United States. And our country fought a incredibly bloody civil war over this issue as well. So I say that, actually, I'll say this and then I'll conclude my stream. I want to take a kind of theological and dogmatic approach when it comes to good and evil. I've mentioned many times, and on my profile I say I'm Catholic, so it's not really something that I hide or mask in any way. It's pretty clear what my belief system is when it comes to religion, for example, and faith. In my lifetime, I've had many people come to me and question me about why bad things happen and why God allows that. And that sort of question is kind of relevant to these founding fathers and historical figures that owned slaves, for example, and things of that nature. Theologically, the church, not just the church, but theologically speaking, the belief is that there's two. It's kind of complicated, actually. Let me try and see if I can sum this up in a very simple and straightforward manner. So you have a question of free will, first of all, where if God didn't allow people to do good or bad things, then you would not have free will. So in order to have free will, you have to be able to make good and bad choices. It's an all or nothing deal. Unless you want to be absolutely controlled in every single aspect of your life, free will is a good thing. Not everybody does the good things with it, but free will is a good thing. You being able to make your own choices is a good thing. Secondly, when bad choices are made, theologically and dogmatically, the belief is that God takes something good from the bad that happens. If something bad happens, God will take that and turn that into a positive somehow. So that's kind of what I was getting at with, well, okay, so you had maybe unsavory elements and historical figures that were instrumental in the building of this country. If you follow that kind of logic, where, okay, they had some bad aspects to them that today we would judge them harshly on. But good came from that, though. The country that we have today would not be possible without these people building it. The prosperity that we have today, that everybody has today, of all ethnicities and all religions and all backgrounds, would not exist if these people did not put the work in to build a country as it is now. Many waves of immigrants that would have come over would not have found that prosperity here that they didn't find in Europe, or they didn't find in Africa, or they didn't find in Asia, or they didn't find in any other country, South America. All these people that came to the United States came here because they're looking for that little golden nugget, for that quote-unquote American dream. And that wouldn't be possible if all of our founding fathers and all the people that sacrificed themselves in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, it wouldn't be possible for people to have the prosperity if it weren't for these people that sacrificed themselves. And whether these were good or bad people, whether they fought for the right or wrong ideals to what we believe is right and wrong in this moment in time, in the future that may change. What our belief systems are, those things seem to be in flux all the time. I mentioned this in my stream yesterday. Even people's sensibilities have changed from the 1990s to now. So imagine the sensibilities 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So, I'm not saying this to justify anything bad that these people in the past did. I'm not. That's not the point of this. The point of this is that it's a whole package deal. And people need to learn to accept that. You're not going to find a pristine example of a historical figure. It doesn't exist. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, he was an adulterer. He cheated on his wife. Does that discount any of the, like, for the black community? Does the black community condemn him for that? No, because they view him as a man who did a lot of good work for their civil rights, and rightly so. He didn't tell people to burn buildings down. He didn't tell people to loot and riot. Gandhi had his weird stuff, for example. He was really obsessed about having a clean colon. Okay. Right on. I guess. But he was very much a promoter of peaceful protest. And a peaceful way of making change for the better for society. You know, peaceful demonstrations, things like that. So I think that there has to be some perspective. Winston Churchill is another guy, which I think he's an amazing historical figure. If it wasn't, a lot of the stuff that he did, for England, and then they just throw him out the window. Like, I don't understand how the UK did that. He saved Britain. He saved Britain's identity. And Europe. One could even argue he saved the world in a certain way. But there's claims that he looked down on certain groups of people, etc., etc. He smoked He drank. He wasn't a very savory person, apparently. But he did good. So, you gotta take the good with the bad and the bad with the good. It's a whole package deal. People are complex. It's not black and white. Everybody has good aspects to them. Everybody has bad aspects to them. And to try and sanctify people that don't deserve sanctification is, to me, a very that sets you up for a very skewed perspective on the world and on people, and I don't think that's wise. So, I will conclude by saying that, the world is a complex place. It is not so simple that things can just be changed like that and the world is a better place automatically. It's not going to happen that way. In fact, I would even argue it's impossible to have a utopia. That everybody argues their own personal utopia. It's not going to happen. Does that mean you can't work towards a better world, or you can't fix things? Of course you can fix things. Of course you can try. Of course you can try and better things. That's not what I'm saying. But if people think that a reactionary policy is going to be the best solution to something, they're sorely mistaken. They are sorely mistaken. It's not, if you're just reacting to something, 99.9% of the time, you're not being rational. You're being emotional. And there's a time for being emotional, and then there's a time for being rational. There's nothing wrong with being emotionally outraged about something, but when you actually have to sit down and solve the problem, it would not be beneficial to be emotional. You have to look at the problem and solve that problem. That's with anything. If you're building a birdhouse, if you're programming a website, if you're doing a painting, you have to apply the techniques and problem solving that you need to break that problem down into small pieces to resolve it. If you're making a painting, you need to look at, okay, how am I going to mix these colors? What brush am I going to use? How am I going to portray this? All these different things, form, lights, shapes, curves, everything. That's what I mean by breaking a problem down. The painting is the problem. You break it into all these manageable little parts, and you can create your masterpiece. Writing a program, that's problem solving. You're trying to make the program do something. How do you do that? Well, you got to break down all the the steps to it and get from point A to point B to get your output. Building a birdhouse, building anything, you need to create the proper foundation. You have to use the right tools. You have to use the right materials, etc., etc. That's what I mean. If you get angry while painting, you get all super emotional because it's not coming out the way you want, you're going to end up not getting the results you want. You get really frustrated because your program isn't working, step away. Come back and then work on it again. You get really frustrated because you hit your thumb with a hammer while building that birdhouse. Guess what? That's not going to be beneficial to you to finish the project, because you're going to just be pissed off and you're going to be in pain. So just a little final word of wisdom. There's a time and place to be emotional. There's a time and place to be rational. And you can't mix the two all the time. There's very few circumstances where emotions and rationality intermingle in a healthy way. Hey, Brevastash Brev. I'm just gonna call you Brev. Yes, sir. Another stream. Thank you for watching. Spread the good word. Tell people to join in and support me by subscribing, hitting notification, and hey, and if they have a couple extra bucks, it would be nice to have that. Streamlabs.com/theeternalabyss. But you actually got here at the tail end of the stream, sir. I'm about to conclude, and I want to say again, thank you everybody for watching. Tonight is going to be the Thursday weekly stream of The Abyss, not the morning edition. The Abyss at 8 p.m. is what I'm shooting for. We'll see how close to the actual time I do start, but I'm shooting for 8 p.m. We're gonna have some fun here. Like I said, I have in the description the Discord link. Join in, because tonight, if people want to come in and chit chat and ask questions, or we're gonna talk about news events and things like that. It's a more interactive version of the stream. I'm trying to expand my horizons. So I'm going to conclude this morning's stream because my coffee is pretty much done. There we go. That was the last drop. I want to thank everybody for watching on Bitwave. I want to thank everybody for watching on Periscope, YouTube, and DLive. And remember, kids, don't be complacent. Go out there, register people to vote, participate, hold officials accountable. Don't be complacent. And I hope everyone has a great day. We'll see you tonight. And that's it for now. Take it easy.